Hello, I'm Reiko Yoshimoto. Thank you for coming to my art show. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for coming today. My name is Bill Yoshimoto. I happen to be privileged to be one of the board members here at Arts Visalia. And as Tracy indicated, we are a community visual arts center, and we have something new every month. So you can come back every month, as she says, and see something different. So here we are. We get to showcase my mother's art, which is just amazing. And then we also get to showcase the art of our dear friend Margaret Moholt with Chinese brush paintings. So make sure you stick around and you look very carefully at each piece because I think they're all so special. I'm going to talk for about 3 hours and then I'll leave some room for questions. No, hopefully I'm only going to talk a little bit and give you the highlights of my mother's life and maybe talk a bit about her art and her technique. I'm going to try to convince you that I'm an expert at this, but her artistic genes did not flow into my body. So I'll see if I can fake it. But anyway, let me start talking about my mother. My mother is Reiko Yoshimoto. She was born in Hiroshima on December 5th, 1928. And so one of the distinctions that she has in our current age is she is a survivor of the atom bomb dropping of Hiroshima. This year they're celebrating, well, I don't know if celebrating is the right term, but they're remembering that this is the 80th anniversary of the bomb dropping in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So there's a lot of pageantry, a lot of ceremonies going on in Japan. And our family, personally, my sister in particular, was very intent on remembering that very, very tragic day. And so my mother, she was 16 years old when the bomb dropped in Hiroshima. And it's one of those crazy things because for some reason on that particular morning, when the bomb dropped or exploded at 8:15, she was not at school. She was not at the work site. Uh, by that time during the war, every child, I think older than junior high age, had to go to work to help the war effort in Japan. And so instead of being at her school, which is very close to the epicenter of the bomb dropping, she was at where she was staying. Her true residence is about 2 miles from the center of where the bomb dropped. But she was at her uncle's house because they had encouraged a lot of people to try to move out of the center of the city. And so she was living with my uncle, her uncle, which was about 3.5 miles from the center of where the bomb dropped. And so on that particular day, for whatever reason it might be, I think a long, long time ago, I asked her, and she said she was sick. And so I thought she must have been really, really sick because Japanese students do not miss school for any reason other than dying or whatever reason like that. But she was home. And so she recalls that she was reading and she all of a sudden saw this bright, bright flash and she felt this heat coming upon her. And then she could look out and she saw the hillside burning up. And then all of a sudden her roof collapsed on her house where she was staying. And so she had to be uncovered. Fortunately, she wasn't injured, but the hill that was in between the blast center and my uncle's house preserved her life because it shielded that house from the immediate blast and the radiation that struck. And so she survived. And immediately after she was, excavated from there, she was looking for her father, who was working in downtown Hiroshima. And he was a bank manager, and he was working at a bank very close to the center of where the bomb was dropped. And she didn't find him for, I think, for at least a couple of days, or at least 2 days later. And he survived the dropping of the bomb because the bank building is one of the few buildings in Hiroshima that was totally made out of concrete and stone. And so it preserved his life. I'm thinking he must have been in the vault or something because, just to have that kind of a blast take place and to survive. Fortunately for her, her brother, she's the middle of three children, so her two brothers were in other places in Japan, not in Hiroshima. And I'm not sure where her mother was, but at least her immediate family all survived this blast. She told me that back at her school site, her work site, there were 750 other fellow students. They all perished in that blast. And if you know anything about the history of Hiroshima, 100,000 people perished in like 30 seconds during that time. And so this is scarred into her memory. It was a very traumatic event. One of the stories that just breaks my heart is, she went looking for her family. She was trying to find her father, and she saw her cousin. And she didn't recognize her cousin because her cousin's face was so burnt and misshapen. And they tried to take care of her later. And it's one of those things that just make you sick. They were trying to attend to the burns, and so when they turned her off of the pillow that she was laying on, she saw these white specks. And so she thought that it was some type of snow or maybe some rice, and it turned out to be white maggots that had infested her head. And I think one of the reasons why my mom hates insects is maybe that type of experience. Fortunately, her cousin survived, but just one of these horrific experiences. So in the context of this horror, in the context of how horrible her experience is, comes this art. So in 1945 or so, 1944, my father left the concentration camp in Heart Mountain, Wyoming, where a lot of Japanese Americans were incarcerated just because of their race. He left that camp and immediately enlisted into the US Army. And he had some language skills, so he was sent to Language Institute and he became a certified interpreter, English-Japanese interpreter. So when the war finally ended, my father is on General MacArthur's staff, and not directly with General MacArthur, but because it's a big staff. He is sent to Japan, and he is liaison with this particular colonel. And my middle name is Ernest, and I was named after that particular colonel. And I guess you do those kinds of things in the Army to brown nose a little bit, but that's where I get my middle name. And so he's sent to Japan, and so he was there from 1945 to about 1954, working with the Japanese government, working with the US Army, and liaisoning between those two entities. And during that time, this is where he meets my mother. And I'm not quite sure what year it was. I'm thinking maybe 1947. And I don't know if it was set up by relatives or he just happened to run across my mother, but I'm pretty sure some relatives thought that this would be a good match for them. And so they started seeing each other, and behold, they were married in 1949. Officially, they were married in 1950 because when they first met and wanted to get married, it was illegal for US servicemen to marry Japanese citizens. And there had to be a law change. And I remember my dad showing me a copy of a letter he had been sending to his congressmen and senators to change that law so he could get married. So I think they went through a Japanese ceremony, and eventually in 1950, they had the official ceremony because the law was changed. And so in 1954, he is discharged and he moves back to Los Angeles where he was born and lived most of his life. In between that time, in 1951, I am born. Okay? And I am born in Osaka, Japan, and I am born at the US Army Hospital that's based in Osaka. And so the curious thing is my birth address is San Francisco, even though I was actually born in Japan. One of the amazing things about that, and I didn't quite understand the full impact of this, but my mom would tell me that when I was born, medical staff had just hovered around. They just came flocking in to see and observe my birth and to see how I would turn out. And a lot of the babies that were born shortly after the dropping of the bomb came out horribly deformed, misshapen. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen photographs of it, but it's just so bizarre and it's just heartbreaking. And so they were hoping, I don't know if they were hoping, but they were looking to see if I would turn out that way. And I didn't have any kind of defects. I didn't have anything, although San Francisco Giants fans think I'm defective because I'm a Dodger fan. They think that, But, I don't know whether it's God's grace or however it turns out, I turned out physically okay. Okay. I'm born, and because of the radiation issues, they're expecting some very damaged people coming out. My mother has suffered cancer from this exposure. It destroyed her thyroids, and so she's been on thyroid medicine all her life. She still is. She is now almost 97 years old, and her back hurts, and things have happened medically with her where she can't travel anymore, although she told my sister just yesterday she wishes she were here today. And so when she says thank you, she really sincerely means thank you. Uh, Let me digress real quick. We showed a lot of this work 11 years ago here. And that was the first time my mother had ever publicly showed any of her artwork. And up until then, my mother believed that she wasn't very good at all with her art, that she just was not talented. And so when we showed her work here, and she was here for the reception, and people were just praising her for the work, it was one of those moments that was kind of life-changing, that she finally understood that what she did was special and it was good, and she was a good artist. And so I thank Arts Visalia for doing that for my mom 11 years ago. So we've got this special link here. My mom, Arts Visalia, and one of the reasons why I'm on the board here is we have this connection. And so today, she's very happy and very proud that you get to see her work. And so the work that's being exhibited today for her is two styles. One is called bunka shisu, which is thread art. And it's a punch needle technique. And the difference between this and traditional embroidery is this is all done from the front. And so she takes the thread, sometimes it's silk, usually it's rayon, and she punches and makes these art forms. I love the tiger in particular because that is coast to coast, wall to wall, all thread work. It took her, I don't know how long, but upwards of a year perhaps. And the eagle over here, as nice as it might be, they have that gold fabric background, and so it's not all thread work. So I think this is the one that makes me think my mom's got a lot of perseverance. She's got a lot of perseverance. The other form that we're showing is called chigiri-e, which means literally torn paper art. And so she takes this paper, special paper called washi, and she tears it, cuts it, manipulates it, and then she layers it on these pieces that you see before you. People are amazed that there are no paint on any of these pieces. There's no ink except for her signature stamp. Everything is layered paper, everything is manipulated paper, everything is just layered with different colors that are put on. So I invite you to stand back, and you would swear that it's a watercolor, but when you have the chance, really get up close. You could see the texture, you could see the fibers as they've been separated out. Chigiri-e is a practice that dates back to about 795 AD, so it's an ancient art form. It's not practiced very much here in the United States. I think there are a little more practitioners in Hawaii, but it's still practiced in Japan, and there are different groups that do that. But here in the United States, this is a very rare occasion to see this form of artwork displayed. So I think you guys are fortunate. I appreciate that you come. And it's one of those things that I'm so proud of my mom. It's just incredible. It's just so incredible that her work is here. Some people have asked, and I'm going to say it right up front, nothing is for sale. My sister and I, we're committed to keep these things within our family. So not that we have all the works, but we have cousins in Boston that have some. My son and daughters have some, my cousins have some. But it all stays pretty much within our family. Although, this work here, okay, by raffle, you can have this one. So I encourage you to support Arts Visalia by purchasing some raffle tickets. So we have a limited amount of tickets, but this is the only piece, and it's never going to be replicated by my mom because she stopped doing this form of art about 6-7 years ago. Physically, she's no longer able to do that. So it's in a nutshell, that's her life. She came from Japan, didn't know anybody, married, with my dad, and made a life that's made a great life for my sister and myself and our grandkids. I think she is a success in so many ways, and her artwork is just a small smidgen because she sent 2 kids to university. We all have graduate degrees, and we're all a loving family all together here. So I think she's very, very successful in her life. A funny story. For immigrants, right, coming to the United States from whatever foreign country you come from, the culture shock, the societal shock is so different. So when she came from Japan, the U.S. Army service gave her a cookbook, and it was how to cook American food. It was in Japanese because she'd never cooked anything that we'd consider American Western style food. And so she had to learn everything, and she's become a very accomplished cook. And so one of the things that we had were tacos. I think tacos are God's gift to mankind, myself. But here she is. She's never done anything like that, and yet she learned how to do that and make excellent tacos for me growing up. So that's just part of her resilience, part of her perseverance, part of her character, and making a life that's integrated into who we are as Americans, who we are as citizens here of California. Who are you pointing at? Oh, that's right. I forgot. Judy said, don't forget. I forgot. My mother also is an accomplished poet, and she's been recognized both here in the United States and Japan for her poetry. She practiced a certain style called tanka. Um, I'm sure you've heard of haiku before. Okay? This is a little different style. It's a little longer than a haiku, but they have a certain syllable arrangement. It's 5-7-5-5-5. Okay? And it doesn't necessarily rhyme. The Japanese, it just fits together. And she wrote a series of poems on her recall of the atom bomb dropping. And we have them translated here in this little booklet, so I'd invite you to take a look at it. Some of them are just heartbreaking to read some of her stories. The translation doesn't do justice to the Japanese language and how it translates into language. It's kind of like if you had the opportunity to read Shakespeare in the original, Klingon, it makes a lot more sense. But here, we just have these translations for you. So I'd really invite you to take a look at that because it's part of who my mom is and part of her memory. I think one of the reasons why she creates such beauty, why at the same time creates such poetry that is so heartfelt is this is part of her way of maybe coping with some of the trauma. Hibakshas, that's what survivors are called, have never really talked about their experience. So my mom never talked about this when we were growing up, and she still doesn't talk about it very often. And this is not just her, but it's just universal with atom bomb survivors. They don't talk about this. And one, in Japanese culture, maybe this is just an oversimplification, maybe this is too harsh, but hibakshas are damaged goods. They've been exposed to radiation, they've been exposed to a trauma, and so they're damaged people. And in Japanese, you don't want to marry into families or have them enter your family if you're a damaged person. And so hibakshas for years would never talk about it, they would never reveal that they're survivors. And it's that way to this day. And it's only in recent years that some have been telling their stories. Recently, there was a PBS documentary called Atomic People, and it's the interviews of a number of survivors. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. On the PBS channel or the website, you can get it there, Atomic People. And so maybe because my mom never would talk about it, she is able to express it in her art. She's able to express the catharsis type of work in her poetry. And so the juxtaposition of horror and beauty at the same time. So thank you for coming. It's a great tribute to my mom because you get to understand, as the saying is here, the eyes, the heart, right, and hands of Reiko Yoshimoto. So questions? Anything? Okay. She was not recognized by the United States government per se, but there are literary societies. There's I don't know what you call it, guilds. And so there was a guild in Los Angeles that practiced tanka as an art form. And so they recognized her poems. And I think the one that they latched onto first was of her grandchildren eating watermelon, you know. And then they started looking at her other forms. There's a literary guild in Japan that has also recognized her artwork because somehow or other, being recognized here, they submitted her work in Japan. And so she was recognized in Japan also. So she's been published in the Japanese language paper. And so that's the recognition. You know, no government, you know, and that's okay. Okay, this one kind of hits some of it, but it's not too graphic. It says, a mother still grieves, unable to save the child trapped and burned in the bombing. And so, you know, English translation is just pretty straightforward, but I'm sure there are Japanese words and phraseologies that make it very poetic. Just in the sense of maybe some context for survivors, this one is on the 50th anniversary. I heard the words, the atomic bombing was justified. They pierced my heart like a blade. So historically, you know, there's a lot of discussion and debate, but for those who survived, it's a very horrible experience. Okay, here it is, and I'll end with this one. You can pick this up later and take a look at it. A child with a face burned by the bomb calls out. I turn back and see my poor cousin. Yeah. So, and I was just thinking because the things that my mom saw, you know, and the ways it's touched her heart and how it's worked out with her hands because she's to do this work, you know, her finger dexterity is just amazing. Okay. And so the flow from what she's seen and observed to how it works in her heart and then it works out in her hands, and that's where that comes from. So whether it's creating beautiful art or writing poetry that is very dark and somber or loving her family, you know, it's all part of who she is. You know, the thread art, she was doing that in the middle 70s. That's when she started her thread art. But this particular art form, she started after she retired from working outside the home. So she was 65, maybe 66, when she started learning this form. She took classes from a master, and then she has just been practicing since that time. She's gotten quite accomplished, I think. So, you know, at 65, that's when she started. So some people tell me, see, there's still hope for you, Bill. You can take up art, you know. She buys the paper from vendors in Japan. And this paper, it's called washi paper. It comes in various colors. So there's solid colors and there are variegated colors. You know, sometimes they're ombre, sometimes they go from light, you know, light, and they have a streak down the middle. So the particular style, when you do chigiri-e, plants, flowers, and some landscapes are very traditional motifs. Okay? But anything could happen with how she created her art. So that's why I'm so proud of her for her Bible story once. She looked at a children's Bible and she was doing a fundraiser for her church and she made bookmarks. And so they sold bookmarks and then she produced these. And again, the scenes were taken out of a children's Bible. So maybe some of you have read that and you've seen a children's Bible and you might recognize those particular pieces. And if you really want to try, I think these days there are kits that are sold that you can, it's kind of like paint by the numbers, you know, you can get a kit and do this. I think that's how my mom pretty much started out. She's using a kit and then she went and did a lot of freelance type of artistry after that. Do I have a favorite piece? Yes, I do. My favorite piece is in that corner. It's the snow scene. That is my favorite piece. Okay. And so there's this camellia right over here, this blue one, where just behind you, that is, I think, a good demonstration, the best demonstration of my mom's technique, because you see the variegation of color from top to bottom, and then you can see how she's manipulated and make the fibers show to make the leaves, and how the changes of color and the layering go on. I think that's, to me, that's a showcase of her best technique. Yeah, I think she absorbs a lot of things. Sometimes, I remember she wrote about the sunset in one of her poems. So just like, any other artist, you draw your inspiration from nature, you draw your inspiration from family, and she did that.